A long time ago in England, there was a brave and kind man named Robin Hood. He lived in Sherwood Forest with his band of outlaws. But Robin Hood was not like other outlaws. He did not steal from the poor. Instead, he took money from the rich and greedy and gave it to the poor and needy. The evil Sheriff of Nottingham. At that time, England was ruled by Prince John, who was cruel and greedy. The rightful king, King Richard the Lionheart, was away fighting in the Crusades. Prince John and his men, especially the Sheriff of Nottingham, made life hard for the people by collecting heavy taxes. Robin Hood and his men, known as merry men, decided to fight back. They hid in the deep forests and attacked the sheriff's soldiers when they tried to take money from the poor. Little John, Robin's strongest friend, and Friar Tuck, a jolly and brave monk, helped him in his adventures. A clever trick. One day, Robin Hood heard that the Sheriff of Nottingham was organizing a grand archery contest. The prize was a golden arrow, and the sheriff planned to capture Robin if he came. Robin Hood, being the best archer in the land, could not resist. He disguised himself as a poor man and entered the contest. When it was his turn, he took aim and hit the center of the target perfectly. The crowd cheered, but the sheriff became suspicious. Before the sheriff's men could catch him, Robin Hood and his merry men escaped into the forest. After escaping from the archery contest, Robin Hood and his merry men continued their fight against the evil Sheriff of Nottingham. The poor people of England loved Robin because he helped them in times of need. But the sheriff was determined to capture him and stop his rebellion. The Sheriff's Trap. One day the sheriff made a new plan to catch Robin Hood. He spread a rumor that a rich merchant was traveling through Sherwood Forest with a chest full of gold. He knew Robin Hood would try to take the gold for the poor. As expected, Robin and his men stopped the merchant's carriage. But as soon as they opened the chest, soldiers jumped out and surrounded them. It was a trap. Robin and his merry men fought bravely, using their bows and swords. Little John knocked down 3 soldiers with his staff, and Friar Tuck used his strength to protect his friends. But there were too many soldiers, and Robin was captured. Robin Hood in prison. The sheriff was overjoyed. He locked Robin Hood in the darkest cell of Nottingham Castle and announced that he would hang him the next morning. The people of Nottingham were heartbroken, but Robin's friends were not going to let him die. Maid Marian, Robin's true love, and Will Scarlet, one of his bravest men, came up with a daring rescue plan. The Great Escape. That night, disguised as monks, the merry men sneaked into the castle. They knocked out the guards and unlocked Robin's cell. Before the sheriff's men could stop them, Robin Hood and his friends escaped into the night. The next morning, when the sheriff came to see Robin, he was shocked to find the cell empty. Robin Hood was free again, and the sheriff's anger burned stronger than ever. Robin Hood knew the battle was far from over. The sheriff would never stop hunting him, and Prince John was still in power. But Robin promised the people, "As long as there is injustice in this land, I will fight for the poor and the innocent." What happens next? Will King Richard return? Will Robin Hood defeat the sheriff once and for all? Robin Hood had escaped from the Sheriff of Nottingham's prison, but the danger was far from over. The sheriff was furious and ordered his soldiers to hunt Robin Hood down. Meanwhile, the people of England were still suffering under the cruel rule of Prince John. But there was hope. The true King of England, King Richard the Lionheart, was finally returning from the Crusades. If he came back to power, he would stop Prince John and the wicked sheriff. The sheriff's final plan. The Sheriff of Nottingham knew that if King Richard returned, he would lose everything. So he made one last plan to capture Robin Hood. He announced that there would be a grand feast in Nottingham Castle. Many rich lords and nobles were invited, and the sheriff spread a rumor that there would be a secret meeting to discuss how to overthrow Prince John. Robin Hood and his merry men suspected a trap, but they couldn't ignore the chance to learn the sheriff's plans. So Robin disguised himself as a nobleman and sneaked into the castle. At the feast, he overheard the sheriff telling the guests, "King Richard will never return. Tomorrow I will hang Robin Hood in the town square and no one will stop me." Robin couldn't stay silent. He pulled off his disguise and shouted, "You will never win, Sheriff. The people stand against you." The sheriff's guards rushed to attack, but before they could catch Robin, his merry men, who had been hiding in the crowd, sprang into action. A great fight broke out in the castle hall. King Richard returns. Just when the battle seemed lost, a trumpet sounded from outside the castle. The doors burst open, and a group of royal knights entered. At the front of the group stood King Richard the Lionheart himself. "Enough!" the king commanded. "Sheriff of Nottingham, your crimes against my people are over!" The people of Nottingham cheered with joy as the sheriff and Prince John's supporters were arrested. King Richard turned to Robin Hood and said, "You have fought bravely for England. I pardon you and your men. A new beginning." With King Richard back on the throne, justice was restored in England. The heavy taxes were lifted, and the people were finally free from the sheriff's cruelty. Robin Hood and Maid Marian were married, and the merry men were honored for their bravery. Though Robin Hood no longer had to hide in Sherwood Forest, he never stopped helping the poor and defending justice. His legend lived on, and for centuries people would tell the story of Robin Hood, the hero who took from the rich and gave to the poor.